"Give me a month to decide if you're really the one," my fiancée said. I answered, "No rush, take your time." What happened next left her begging for a second chance. Let me paint you the picture of how my world got flipped upside down on what started as just another Tuesday morning. I'm sitting at my desk downtown Minneapolis, coffee getting cold while I'm running numbers for a client portfolio, when my phone buzzes with a text from Amber. 5 years we've been together, 10 months engaged with our summer wedding already booked at this beautiful venue outside the city. I'm thinking it's probably her asking what I want for dinner or complaining about her manager at the retail store again. Instead, I read the words that would change everything. "Kevin, I need a month to evaluate whether you're really worth committing my entire life to. This is important to me." Just like that. No context, no warning, nothing. I stared at that message for maybe 10 minutes, reading it over and over, waiting for the follow-up text that would explain this was some kind of joke or mistake. It never came. My first instinct was to call her immediately, to ask what the hell was going on, but something in my gut told me to pause. So I typed back something simple: "Take all the time you need, Amber. I understand." Then I set my phone down and tried to focus on work, but my mind was spinning. 5 years together. We talked about kids, picked out baby names, argued about whether we'd live in the suburbs or stay downtown. 10 months ago, I'd gotten down on one knee in front of her whole family at her cousin's wedding reception, and she'd cried happy tears while everyone cheered. Now suddenly she needed to evaluate whether I was worth her life? The more I sat with it, the more something didn't feel right. This wasn't Amber having cold feet or pre-wedding jitters. This felt calculated, like someone had coached her on exactly what to say. By lunch, instead of being heartbroken or angry, I found myself getting curious about something I'd never really examined before: our finances. See, I'm a financial analyst by trade, but when it came to our personal situation, I'd been running on autopilot for years, just handling things to keep the peace. Amber lived in my downtown condo and paid me $350 a month, which didn't even cover the HOA fees, let alone her portion of the mortgage. She was on my health insurance through my company because her retail job offered garbage coverage. The car she drove every day? Loan was in my name because her credit was shot. Her credit cards were maxed out from shopping sprees and girls' trips, so I'd added her as an authorized user on mine for emergencies that somehow happened twice a week. I started doing the math, and it was staggering. I was essentially subsidizing another adult's entire lifestyle while she contributed the bare minimum and acted like she was doing me a favor. The woman who needed a month to decide if I was worth her life had been living off my financial stability for years without ever acknowledging it. That realization hit me like cold water. This wasn't about love or compatibility or whether we were right for each other. This was about her treating me like a resource rather than a partner. While I'd been quietly handling everything to avoid drama and keep our relationship smooth, she'd gotten so comfortable with the arrangement that she felt entitled to put me on probation. So I did what any good analyst would do. I started making calls. First, I called Paul, my property manager, and asked about eviction procedures for tenants who weren't on the lease. Professional conversation, all business. Then I called my insurance company during their open enrollment period and inquired about removing a domestic partner from my plan. Finally, I logged into my credit card accounts and reviewed all the shared expenses from the past year. Every dinner out, every shopping trip, every weekend getaway, I'd been paying for everything while telling myself it was because I made more money and wanted to be generous. But generosity requires gratitude. And looking back, I couldn't remember the last time Amber had actually thanked me for anything. She just expected it. When I got home that evening, Amber was already packing a bag. She'd left a note on the kitchen counter asking for space and saying she'd be staying with her friend Stephanie for a while. No explanation about the text, no conversation about what was really going on, just her grabbing clothes and toiletries like she was heading out for a normal weekend trip. "I think this is best for both of us right now," she said without making eye contact. "I need to figure things out." I watched her pack and didn't say a word. Part of me wanted to ask questions, to fight for answers, to beg her to stay and work through whatever this was. But a bigger part of me was curious to see how long her evaluation would last once she realized that her financial safety net was about to disappear. She kissed my cheek on her way out, like nothing had changed, like she wasn't walking away from 5 years together to go figure out if I was good enough for her. The door clicked shut, and I was alone in the condo we'd shared for 3 years, surrounded by all the furniture I'd bought and all the pictures of our life together. That's when I made the calls that would change everything. Wednesday morning is when everything I'd set in motion the day before came crashing down on Amber's world like a house of cards. I was in my office early, reviewing quarterly reports, when my phone started buzzing like an angry wasp. Text after text after text. By the time I actually looked at it, there were 45 messages and 19 missed calls, all from Amber. The first few texts were confused. "Kevin, my card got declined at Starbucks. Can you check if there's an issue?" Then they got progressively more frantic. "The gas station declined my card too. What's going on?" By message 20, she'd figured it out. "You removed me from your credit cards? Are you serious right now?" And by message 40, she was in full panic mode. "Kevin, I can't buy groceries. I can't get gas. You can't just do this to me." I set the phone aside and went back to my reports. She wanted a month to evaluate whether I was worth her life? Well, she was about to get a real clear picture of what life looked like without my financial support. Around 10 that morning, my office phone rang. It was Brandon, Amber's brother, and he was furious. "Kevin, what the hell is wrong with you, man? You can't just cut Amber off like this. This is financial abuse." I had to laugh at that one. "Brandon, let me explain something to you. Financial abuse is when you control someone's access to their own money. I removed Amber as an authorized user on my credit cards because we're no longer together. She has her own job, her own credit cards, and her own bank account. She's a 31-year-old woman with a retail manager position. She can support herself. But she's been relying on you for years," he shot back. "You can't just change the rules overnight." "I didn't change any rules, Brandon. Amber did when she decided she needed to evaluate whether I'm worth her time. Well, now she can evaluate what her life looks like funding herself." The conversation went downhill from there, with Brandon calling me everything but a decent human being before hanging up on me. 20 minutes later, my assistant knocked on my door. "Kevin, there's a woman on line 2 claiming to be your future mother-in-law. She says it's urgent." Patricia, Amber's mom, was somehow even more worked up than Brandon had been. "Kevin, honey, I don't know what's gotten into you, but you need to fix this situation with Amber right now. She called me crying, saying you've cut off all her cards and she can't even buy food." I took a deep breath and used my most professional voice. "Patricia, Amber and I are taking a break while she evaluates our relationship. Since we're not together right now, I thought it made sense to separate our finances. She's got her own income and her own credit cards. But those cards are maxed out, Kevin. You know that. Then maybe she should focus on paying them down instead of evaluating whether I'm good enough for her." There was a long pause. "You're being cruel, Kevin. This isn't like you." "What's not like me, Patricia, is standing up for myself. But I'm learning." After I hung up, it hit me how deep this whole thing really went. It wasn't just Amber who'd gotten comfortable with my financial support. Her whole family had been benefiting from it for years. Brandon's car repairs when he was between jobs. Patricia's help with bills when her fixed income wasn't enough. Amber's cousin's wedding gift that I'd written the check for. They'd all gotten used to Kevin the ATM, and now they were panicking because their access had been cut off. The truth was starting to crystallize. They'd never really respected me. I was just stable and acceptable and, most importantly, willing to open my wallet. Around lunch, my friend Mike called with information that confirmed what I'd already started to suspect. "Hey man, I was at that new place in Uptown last night, and I saw Amber there with some guy. They looked pretty cozy, if you know what I mean. Thought you should know." I thanked Mike and hung up, but I wasn't surprised. See, there was something I hadn't mentioned to anyone yet. A few weeks ago, I'd been using Amber's iPad to look up a recipe, and her text messages had popped up on the screen. Turns out, when you share an Apple ID, everything syncs, including dating app notifications. She'd been active on 3 different apps for the past 3 months, right up until our engagement party. I'd scrolled through enough conversations to see the pattern. She was shopping around, keeping her options open while keeping me as her safety net. The guy Mike saw her with was probably Nathan, based on the messages I'd seen. Young guy with a decent job and a car, seemed eager to please, probably had no idea he was being auditioned as my replacement. The beautiful thing about being a financial analyst is that you learn to look at data objectively, without letting emotions cloud your judgment. And the data was crystal clear. Amber hadn't gotten cold feet about marriage. She'd gotten greedy. She wanted to see if she could upgrade while keeping all the financial benefits I provided as a backup plan. Her family's reaction proved they were all in on it, whether consciously or not. They'd built their expectations around my generosity, and now that the well had dried up, they were scrambling to shame me back into compliance. But here's what they didn't understand about me: I don't respond well to manipulation. Never have. And once I see the game being played, I don't just quit playing. I flipped the board over. My phone was still buzzing with increasingly desperate messages from Amber. The last one read, "Kevin, please. Can we just talk? I'm scared." For the first time since this whole thing started, I actually felt something. Not love, not anger, but something colder. Disappointment, maybe. Or clarity. I typed back, "You wanted space to evaluate. Take all the space you need." Then I turned off my phone and got back to work. Thursday morning brought the confrontation I'd been expecting, though not quite in the way I'd imagined it would happen. I was walking back from my lunch meeting when I spotted her in the lobby of my office building. Amber was sitting in one of those modern chairs near the elevator bank, and she looked rough. Really rough. Her hair was unwashed and pulled back in a messy ponytail. She was wearing the same clothes I'd seen her in 2 days ago, and her makeup was smeared like she'd been crying. When she saw me, she jumped up and practically ran over. "Kevin, please, we need to talk. Just 20 minutes. That's all I'm asking." The security guard was watching us, probably wondering if he needed to intervene, so I nodded toward the coffee shop across the street. We walked over in silence, and I could feel the desperation radiating off her like heat. Once we sat down, she immediately launched into this rehearsed speech about how she'd made a mistake, how she'd been confused and scared about marriage, how she wanted to work things out. I let her talk for about 5 minutes before I cut her off. "Amber, stop. I know about the dating apps." Her face went white. Like, completely drained of color. "Kevin, I can explain." 3 months, Amber. You've been active on Bumble, Hinge, and Tinder for 3 months. While we were engaged. While we were planning our wedding. She started crying then, these big dramatic sobs that probably would have worked on me a year ago. "It wasn't serious, Kevin. I wasn't meeting anyone. I was just looking." "You were shopping," I said. "And this whole evaluation thing? This was Stephanie's idea, wasn't it?" The way her shoulders slumped told me everything I needed to know. She said it would shake things up. That it would make you fight for me. Show me how much you really cared. I almost laughed. "So let me get this straight. You and your friend cooked up a scheme to put our entire relationship on trial, while you secretly auditioned my replacement, and now you're surprised that I'm not playing along." "It wasn't supposed to go like this," she whispered. "I was supposed to come back and you were supposed to. I was supposed to beg. I was supposed to promise you the world and prove that I couldn't live without you. And then you'd graciously decide I was worth keeping around." She nodded, still crying. "Kevin, I realize how stupid it sounds now, but I love you. I want to marry you. Can't we just forget this happened?" I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the envelope I'd been carrying around since yesterday. "This is a 30-day eviction notice. You need to be out of my condo by the end of the month." Her jaw dropped. "Kevin, you can't be serious. Where am I supposed to go?" "That's not my problem anymore, Amber. You wanted to evaluate whether I'm worth your life. Well, I've done my own evaluation, and I've decided you're not worth mine." I stood up and walked away, leaving her sitting there with the eviction notice in her hands. I didn't look back, but I could hear her calling my name from the coffee shop. The rest of Thursday was a circus. My phone was blowing up with texts from her family, all variations of, "How could you do this to her?" and "She's family, Kevin." But the most telling one came from Brandon. "She's moving her stuff out tonight. I hope you're happy." Around 7 that evening, I watched from my window as Amber and Stephanie made trip after trip from my building to Stephanie's car, loading up boxes and suitcases. It was chaotic and rushed, like she was fleeing a natural disaster. My neighbor Mrs. Chun stopped by to ask if everything was okay, and I told her we'd broken up. "Oh honey," she said, "I'm sorry, but honestly, that girl never seemed grateful for anything you did for her." Out of the mouths of 70-year-old neighbors, right? Friday morning, I was getting ready for work when I heard a commotion in the hallway. Through my peephole, I could see Amber, Brandon, and Patricia struggling with boxes and a dolly. They had a U-Haul truck double parked outside, and they were trying to move everything back in. I opened the door and Brandon immediately got aggressive. "Kevin, just let us move her stuff back in. She's got nowhere else to go." "She can't move out and then move back in," I said calmly. "That's not how eviction notices work. She's got 30 days from yesterday to find a new place." "This is insane," Patricia chimed in. "Kevin, she's your fiancée." "No, she's not. She's my ex-fiancée who decided she needed to evaluate whether I was worth her time." "Well, the evaluation is over." The best part of all this? I found out later from Mike, who heard it from his girlfriend, who heard it from Stephanie, that Amber's date with Nathan on Wednesday night had been a complete disaster. Apparently, when the check came at dinner, Nathan had suggested they split it. Amber had sat there in shock because she literally didn't know how to respond. She'd gotten so used to me paying for everything that the concept of going Dutch was foreign to her. When she tried to explain that she didn't have any money, Nathan had gotten suspicious and started asking questions. Once he figured out that she was essentially testing him as a replacement for her financially stable fiancé, he'd paid his half of the bill and walked out. No second date. No backup plan. No replacement Kevin waiting in the wings. I learned later that Nathan had actually called his buddy and said something like, "Dude, I just dodged the biggest bullet of my life. This chick is completely unhinged." By Friday afternoon, Amber was officially homeless and single, with maxed out credit cards and a retail job that barely covered her car payment. The woman who'd needed a month to decide if I was worth committing her life to had lost everything in less than a week. And the crazy part? I felt absolutely nothing. No guilt, no regret, no second thoughts. Just relief that I'd finally seen the situation clearly. The final act of this whole drama played out exactly 1 week later, and it was both pathetic and revealing in ways I hadn't expected. I was coming home from the gym on a Thursday evening when I found Amber waiting by my building entrance. But this wasn't the disheveled, desperate woman I'd seen the week before. She'd clearly put effort into her appearance, hair done, makeup perfect, wearing that blue dress I'd always complimented her on. She looked like the woman I'd fallen in love with 5 years ago, and I could tell that was exactly the point. "Kevin, please. Just hear me out." 5 minutes. Against my better judgment, I let her into the lobby. We sat on the same chairs where she'd ambushed me at my office building, and she launched into what was obviously a carefully prepared speech. "I've been doing a lot of thinking this week, and I realize I made the biggest mistake of my life. I want to fix this. I'll go to therapy. I'll get a second job. I'll cut off my family if that's what it takes. Kevin, I love you, and I want to marry you." It was a good performance, I'll give her that. But I'd learned to look past the surface. "Amber, why do you want to marry me?" "Because I love you, obviously." "No, I mean really. What is it about me specifically that makes you want to spend your life with me?" She faltered for a second, then gave me this generic answer about how I was kind and stable and we had history together. So I pressed harder. "If I lost my job tomorrow and had to move back in with my parents, would you still want to marry me?" The silence stretched out for almost a minute. Finally, she said, "Kevin, that's not fair. That's not a realistic scenario." "It's a simple question, Amber. If I couldn't provide for you financially, would you still want to be with me?" "Kevin, I can't afford to live in Minneapolis on my own. The rent alone would take my entire paycheck, and I still have my credit cards to pay off. I need..." She stopped, realizing what she'd just admitted. "You need what, Amber?" "I need stability. I need security. Kevin, you know I've never been good with money." And there it was. The truth, finally. "Amber, Let me tell you something that might help you understand what really happened here. You didn't lose me this week. You lost me 3 months ago when you downloaded those dating apps and started shopping for my replacement. This week, you just lost your funding. Her face crumpled. Kevin, that's not true. I do love you. Maybe you do in your own way. But what you love about me isn't me. It's what I provide. The condo, the insurance, the credit cards, the safety net. You love my stability more than you love my company. She tried a few more angles after that. Could she stay in the condo until she found her own place? Would I co-sign an apartment for her? Absolutely not. Could she borrow some money to get back on her feet? Not a chance. Each rejection hit her like a physical blow, and I watched her cycle through anger, bargaining, and finally desperation. Kevin, please. I'm begging you. I have nowhere to go. You have your family. You have your job. You have the same resources every other adult has to figure out their life. But I can't do this alone. Then you probably should have thought about that before you decided to evaluate whether I was worth your time. That was the last conversation we had face to face. But it wasn't the end of the story. About a week later, Amber launched what I can only describe as a social media smear campaign. Facebook posts about financial abuse, Instagram stories about how men use money to control women, tweets about toxic relationships. She painted herself as the victim of a manipulative partner who'd trapped her financially and then abandoned her when she tried to stand up for herself. It was actually pretty clever, the way she spun it. She never mentioned the dating apps or the evaluation period or the fact that she'd been living off my income for years while contributing almost nothing. Just poor Amber, struggling to escape an abusive relationship with a controlling man who'd cut off her access to money out of spite. For about 48 hours, it worked. She got sympathy from mutual friends, supportive comments from people who didn't know the full story, even a few offers of help from strangers who believed her narrative. Then my sister Sarah got involved. Sarah's a lawyer, and she doesn't mess around when someone comes after her family. She'd been following Amber's posts with increasing irritation, and she'd finally had enough. Sarah made her own Facebook post, and it was surgical. She included screenshots of Amber's dating profiles from the past 3 months. Screenshots of text messages where Amber had bragged to Stephanie about how easy it was to get me to pay for things. Screenshots of bank statements showing the thousands of dollars I'd spent supporting someone who was actively looking for my replacement. She laid out the timeline methodically, the months of dating app activity, the evaluation scheme, the desperate scrambling when the money got cut off. And then she ended with this line that just destroyed Amber's whole narrative. This isn't financial abuse. This is financial independence. Every adult should try it. The post went viral in our social circle. Amber's sob story crumbled overnight as people started asking questions she couldn't answer. Why had she been on dating apps while engaged? Why hadn't she just broken up with Kevin instead of putting him on trial? How exactly was it abuse for someone to stop paying your bills when you were no longer together? The sympathy evaporated, and Amber deleted all her social media accounts within a week. 3 weeks after our final conversation, I ran into Mike at our usual coffee place, and he updated me on the aftermath. Amber was living with her mother Patricia in a cramped apartment in St. Paul, working extra shifts at the retail store to help cover Patricia's bills since she could no longer rely on Kevin-funded family visits. Brandon had stopped speaking to her after she'd asked him for money, and Stephanie had distanced herself once she realized the manipulation scheme had backfired spectacularly. Meanwhile, I was doing better than I had in years. I'd started going to the gym regularly, something I'd let slide during the relationship because Amber always wanted to do other things on weekends. I'd met someone there, actually, Sarah, a nurse who insisted on paying for her own coffee when we went out, who had her own place and her own car and her own life that didn't require my financial support to function. We'd been on 4 dates, and each time she'd either paid her share or covered the whole check herself. It was refreshing in a way I hadn't realized I'd been missing. But more than the new relationship, more than the extra money in my account each month, what I'd gained was clarity about what I actually wanted in a partner. I wanted someone who saw me as a person, not a provider. Someone who contributed to our life together instead of just consuming from it. Someone who respected me enough to be honest about their feelings instead of playing manipulation games. The whole experience taught me that love without respect isn't really love at all. It's just convenience dressed up in romantic language. Amber had been convenient for me too, in her own way. It was easier to pay for everything than to deal with the drama of splitting expenses. But convenience isn't a foundation for a marriage. Respect is. Trust is. Partnership is. I never saw Amber again after that night in my building lobby, and I never wanted to. She'd shown me exactly who she was and what I meant to her, and I'd finally listened. Sometimes the best thing someone can do for you is give you permission to see them clearly. Amber's evaluation period had done exactly that, just not in the way she'd intended.